President Donald Trump, known for his boldness, did something unexpected when he received a handwritten letter from small-town farmer John Mitchell. He accepted the invitation to visit his struggling farm. As the presidential convoy arrived, and Secret Service agents scanned the area, John, a proud third-generation farmer, wiped his hands on his overalls and greeted Trump with a firm handshake, saying, "Mr. President, I appreciate you coming, but I won't sugarcoat my words." Trump smirked. "I wouldn't expect anything less." Wasting no time, John spoke up. "Sir, politicians make big promises, but farmers are drowning. Prices drop, fuel costs rise. Are you here to listen or just to talk?" Trump raised an eyebrow and replied, "John, I respect farmers, but things take time." John scoffed. "We don't have time. Our land is suffering. Families are drowning in debt, and big corporations are swallowing small farms." Trump crossed his arms and said, "I've done more for farmers than most presidents." But John wasn't intimidated. "Then why am I still struggling?" he shot back, as the air grew tense and Secret Service agents shifted uneasily, sensing the conversation could boil over. John's wife, Lisa, stepped in gently. "Gentlemen, let's sit down." Inside their modest kitchen, John gestured toward the fridge and said, "We grow food for thousands, but we can barely afford our own groceries." Trump frowned. "What's stopping you from succeeding?" John leaned forward. "Big corporations. They buy up land, lower prices, and squeeze out small farmers." Trump tapped the table and replied, "That's capitalism." John clenched his jaw. "There's a difference between competition and being crushed." Trump glanced at Lisa as she set a plate of homemade cornbread in front of him and said, "Mr. President, you should taste what struggling America really is." Trump took a bite and nodded. "It's good." Lisa smiled faintly. "We sell it at the market, but we barely break even." John sighed. "Farming isn't just a job, it's our life. Our kids should inherit this land, not debt." Trump nodded slowly. "I hear you." And John leaned in closer. "But do you understand us?" John asked. And for the first time, Trump looked around the humble home. Family photos, worn-out furniture, a crack in the wall. He wasn't in a boardroom or at a rally. He was in the heart of America, where words weren't enough and listening mattered. John rolled up his sleeves and said, "Let me show you something." Outside, he held up his cracked, calloused, dirt-stained hands. "These hands have worked. This soil since I was a boy, just like my father's, and his before him." Trump studied them and nodded. "Hard work." John replied, "But hard work alone isn't enough anymore." Trump exhaled. "So what do you want from me?" John looked him in the eye and said, "Not handouts or speeches. We need real change. Policies that protect farmers like us, not just the big corporations." Trump was quiet, then smirked. "Ever driven a tractor?" John chuckled. "Not lately," and led him to an old John Deere. "Hop in." Trump hesitated, then climbed up as John handed him the controls. "This is what feeds America." Trump slowly steered the tractor forward, gripping the wheel tightly. It wasn't easy. John leaned in and said, "See, Mr. President, this is more than business. It's personal." Trump nodded, a rare look of reflection crossing his face. "I get it." But John wasn't convinced. "Do you?" Trump looked out over the endless fields. "Maybe not fully, but I'm starting to." As they walked back, John wiped the sweat from his brow. "We're not lazy, and we're not asking for favors. But banks treat us like risks while corporations get bailouts." Trump frowned. "I believe in free markets." John shook his head. "Markets should be fair, not rigged." Trump sighed. "The system's complicated." John scoffed. "Not to us. It's simple. If we fail, America's food supply fails." Trump glanced at the barn, the land, the effort it took to stay afloat. For the first time, he didn't just see numbers or policies, but the people behind them. That changed everything. Lisa walked over and asked, "Would you like to stay for dinner, Mr. President?" Trump blinked, surprised. "Dinner?" John chuckled. "We're blunt. but we're hospitable. Trump hesitated. His schedule was packed. His advisors would object, but he nodded. All right. Lisa smiled. Good. You'll see what real farm food tastes like. John smirked. And hear more of my complaints. Trump laughed. I figured, John said as they walked inside, thinking maybe, just maybe, this visit would lead to real change. He only hoped Trump would remember their conversation long after leaving the farm, unaware of what was coming. Next, Trump sat at the worn wooden dining table as Lisa placed a plate of home-cooked food in front of him, mashed potatoes, grilled chicken, and fresh cornbread. John smirked. No fancy White House meals here. Trump took a bite and nodded. Good food. Lisa smiled. Good food made by hard-working hands. John leaned in. You've heard our struggles, Mr. President. But what happens after this? Will this just be another visit? Trump set his fork down and said, I don't forget conversations like this. John studied him and replied, We'll see. Something about this dinner felt different, like a shift was taking place. John tapped the table. Farmers are being forced to sell their land to corporations. They control the prices and we can't compete. Trump nodded. So what's the... Stronger protections for small farmers, better trade policies, John said with a sigh. Trump rubbed his chin. I've been tough on trade. John shook his head. But we're still suffering. We don't need politics. We need real action. Lisa chimed in. Farming isn't just numbers, Mr. President. It's people, families, generations. As Trump glanced around the modest home for the first time, he truly saw the human side of policy, and it struck a nerve. When the meal ended, John leaned back and asked, So, Mr. President, what now? Trump exhaled. I don't make empty promises. John smirked. Good, because we don't trust empty words. Trump stood and said, Give me time. John folded his arms. We don't have time. Trump extended a hand. I'll do something about this. John hesitated, then shook it. Then prove it. As Trump left, he looked out at the fields. One last time. This wasn't just politics anymore. It was personal. John had challenged him in a way few ever did. 2 weeks later, while fixing a fence, John's phone rang. This is John. A familiar voice replied, John, it's Donald Trump. John nearly dropped the phone. Mr. President? Trump said, I didn't forget you. I've got something in motion, Trump said. John's heart pounded. What do you mean? You'll see soon enough, Trump replied before hanging up. John stared at his phone, doubtful Trump would remember, but maybe, just maybe, something was happening. Lisa walked over, curious. Who was that? John smirked. The President of the United States. For the first time in years, John felt something unexpected. Hope. A month later, John sat in his truck, listening to the radio. We have breaking news, the reporter announced. President Trump has signed an executive order to protect small farmers from unfair corporate practices. John's jaw dropped. Lisa rushed outside. Did you hear? John jumped out of his truck. He actually did something. Farmers across the country watched in shock. A president had listened, and a president had acted. John wasn't easily impressed, but this was real. For the first time in a long time, small farmers felt seen, and John had unknowingly started it all. One afternoon, a black SUV rolled onto John's farm. A Secret Service agent stepped out. Mr. Mitchell, the president wants to see you. John blinked, stunned. Minutes later, Trump stepped out, extending his hand. Told you I wouldn't forget. John shook his head, grinning. I'll admit, I'm impressed. Trump smirked. I don't just talk, I deliver. Lisa welcomed them inside. So, what brings you back, Mr. President? Trump leaned forward. I want to hear more. There's still work to do. John was speechless. A president had returned, not for a photo op, but to listen, and that meant everything. As they walked the fields, Trump asked, What else do farmers need? John didn't hesitate. Infrastructure, roads, irrigation, better equipment access. Trump nodded. All right, let's make it happen. John squinted. You're serious? Trump smirked. You should know by now I don't joke about winning. John chuckled. Well, I hope farmers finally start winning. Trump patted his shoulder. They will. For the first time in years, John saw a future where farming wasn't a losing battle. Maybe the tides were turning, and it all started with a simple invitation. News outlets swarmed the farm. Why did the president return? One reporter asked. John shrugged. Because he actually cares. Critics called it a publicity stunt, but John disagreed. Trump listened when no one else did. Trump faced the cameras and declared, "Farmers are the backbone of America. I won't let them fall." For once, the political divide faded as Americans, farmers, workers, families, saw something rare. A leader who wasn't just talking, but acting. John, once skeptical, now found himself part of something bigger than he ever imagined. Calls poured in from farmers nationwide. "John, you actually got him to listen." John laughed. "I just spoke the truth. Farmers long ignored, finally." "Have a voice," Trump called again. "John, you've become the face of this movement." John shook his head. "I'm just a farmer." Trump chuckled. "And yet, here we are." John never wanted fame, but if his voice helped farmers, he'd keep speaking, and the fight wasn't over. Sitting at his table reviewing new farming policies, John frowned. "We still need long-term solutions." Trump called. "John, I want you on an advisory board." John was stunned. "Me? Who better to represent real farmers?" He hesitated. "I'm not a politician." Trump laughed. "Exactly." John looked at Lisa, who nodded. Maybe this was his chance to make real change, not just for himself, but for farmers everywhere. Stepping into the White House, feeling out of place, John sat with policymakers and knew he belonged. Trump said, "John, tell them what farmers really need." John cleared his throat. "All right, let's get to work." For years he had fought alone. Now he had America's most powerful ally. Months later, John stood in his fields watching his children run through the crops. Lisa smiled. "You changed things." John shook his head. "We did." From one heated debate, a movement began. Farmers were no longer forgotten. John was still just a farmer, but now his voice mattered. And it all started with a simple letter. One Donald Trump had chosen to read. Sometimes the most unexpected conversations change history, and this one did.